Most PC upgrades generally do nothing and are a waste of money, and I wasted enough on them to build like 6 extra PCs at this point. So let me save you some money. These are the 5 upgrades people waste the most money on and what is actually worth buying instead. And the first waste is buying another graphics card every time your FPS feels bad. That was my strategy at 14, CS ran badly, so I asked my mom for about like $200, bought another GPU, and the game ran almost the same. Now I still had a slow PC and I had to explain why the expensive part she paid for fixed nothing. And my Discord and Reddit are still full of people asking the same question. I upgraded my GPU, why my FPS is still bad? Because the CPU runs the game and the GPU draws the picture. If the CPU cannot prepare frames fast enough, a faster GPU has to wait. For example, recently I watched one guy stream CS on an RTX 4090, around like 200 FPS at spawn, then under 100 in fights. And he said the PC was fine because he had a 4090. But a 4090 only proves the graphic card is fast, it doesn't prove the whole PC is fast. So test it first, same game, same map, same area, FPS cap off. Then lower the resolution or render scale by a lot. If FPS jumps, the GPU was probably the limit. If FPS barely changes, do not buy another GPU, something else is holding you back. And if the GPU really is the problem, make it a real jump. A small step in the same tier can cost hundreds and still feel like the same PC. Now for a 1440p card aim at heavy AAA games, 12GB of video memory or more is also the safer buy. 8 can still work in lighter games, but it can force lower textures in newer titles. Now my 1470 Super is already enough for Valorant and CS2, replacing it for those games would be pointless. But in heavy AAA games where I need more DLSS or lower settings than I want, a stronger GPU would help. So waste number 1 is the blind GPU upgrade. But if lower settings do almost nothing, waste number 2 can cost even more. And the second waste is buying a pre-built PC that looks upgradable. Then finding out one new part means replacing almost everything. And I had this problem with my first pre-built PC that I bought, which was like an Acer Nitro. And it had like a GTX 1660 Ti, which was basically the only good part. Now the motherboard, power supply and case were made around that exact system. So later normal upgrades were impossible to do because the PSU could not be upgraded. The motherboard was some no-name made in China specifically for this build, and basically if I wanted something else I had to buy a brand new PC. But of course pre-builds are not a problem. My current PC was also assembled for me because I hate cable management and sometimes I just want like a plug and play experience. The difference is that it uses normal retail parts. And because of that I recently changed only the CPU to a Ryzen 9850 X3D. Same GPU, same RAM, same settings. And in the competitive games I play, my average FPS went from like roughly 280 to around like 500 to 600 FPS, which is like huge. So if you want a pre-build and you don't want to waste a lot of money, buy one made from standard retail parts. You should be paying for assembly, cable management, warranty and convenience, not like a locked box. So waste number 2 is a dead-end pre-built PC. What actually matters is the standard parts and a real upgrade path. And waste number 3 can sometimes be fixed for free. But before we jump into it, today's video is sponsored by NordVPN. Now there are 2 reasons most people end up with a VPN: getting to stuff that's blocked in your region and not wanting every random site logging what they're doing. And NordVPN has been one of the best at both for years, and that hasn't changed, it still is. Now what has changed is that NordVPN is more than a VPN now. That's still the core, you can still use it to watch that weird anime that's not available in your region on Netflix, but what's actually cool is that it's turned into an all-in-one security app. And the part actually worth flagging is the built-in next-gen antivirus. It's privacy first, so it works differently from the traditional kind. It scans your download as they come in, blocks scams and phishing sites before they load, and stops malicious ads before they fire. The stuff you normally pay 3 or 4 separate companies for in one subscription. No app makes you completely safe, nothing does, so be careful with anything that claims it. But if you're clicking links and pulling files all day, something actively watching that is a real step up from running nothing. It runs across your device of one account, up to 10 of them, and if you already go out of your way for your security, this just stacks on top of that nicely. Now the links in the pinned comments and in the description, and code KIMMYVPN gets you an exclusive deal plus 4 extra mounts with a 30-day money back guarantee. And now let's go back to the video. So the third waste is buying more RAM while the RAM already inside your PC is set up badly. Now you will see a lot of people buying like 64GB of RAM, giant RGB kits or the biggest megahertz number they can find. Then they use one stick, mix 2 kits, use the wrong slots or never turn on XMP or eExpo. So check 3 things first. First, use one matched kit with 2 sticks of RAM, because that kit was validated to run together at its rated XMP or eExpo speed. Mixing separate kits can still work, but it often forces your system to drop to a slower common speed or disable XMP can be overexposed, and in the worst case it can cause random crashes or instability when you're pushing high FPS in games. Next thing, drop your sticks into the slots the motherboard manual shows for dual channel, usually A2 and B2. That way both memory channels are active, doubling your memory bandwidth and allowing the CPU to access data much faster. Then enable XMP and EXPO in the BIOS. Out of the box, most RAM kits boot at a slow, safe, non-overclock speed. That profile loads the frequency and timings printed on the box so you can actually get the performance you paid for. And after all of this, chose the right capacity. 8GB is too little for many new games, 16 still works for most games and is fine on a tight budget, 32 has two 16GB sticks is the easy choice for a modern gaming PC. 64 is for editing, huge mod packs, virtual machines or like heavy multitasking, not normal gaming. So waste number 3 is buying more, faster or prettier RAM before fixing the setup. Here what actually matters is a matched kit, enough capacity and the correct profile turn on. If you already have like 32GB with perfect setup, buy nothing. And once the FPS part is covered, companies stop selling you frames and start selling you storage speed. So the fourth waste is buying an expensive gaming SSD because you expect more FPS. Now if you're grinding ranked or fancy, that money almost never buys you more frames. A faster SSD usually does not raise your average frames at all. What it actually does is make windows and games open faster, cut loading screens and fast travel times, and in some newer open world titles it can help the game stream textures and map chunks a bit more smoothly as you move. Now the big jump is moving from a hard drive to an SSD. After that the gains get much smaller. Hard drive to SSD is like huge, you feel it every day when the PC boots and when you load into a match. SATA SSD to NVMe, useful in some newer games and big titles, but we're talking like seconds, not minutes. Now good NVMe to Gen 5, usually just a tiny difference that needs a timer or a benchmark to even notice. And the giant speed number on the box is mainly for moving huge files, without projects, backups, datasets, something like that. Now I can feel the difference between a hard drive and SSD every single day, but between two good NVMe drives I honestly cannot tell which one is faster in a game without timing it. So if your games are still on a hard drive, move them to any decent SSD first. If you're building today, buy a reliable 1 or 2TB Gen 3 or Gen 4 NVMe, then make sure you have enough space before you start chasing peak speed numbers. So waste number 4 is paying extra for a benchmark number. And the last waste in this list is where the rest of the budget quietly disappears. And that waste is buying support parts like they create FPS. The clearest example is a $400 or $500 gaming motherboard. If a solid mid-range board supports your CPU, runs your RAM correctly and has the slots you need, a flagship board usually gives you the same gaming performance. The extra money buys more ports, more storage slots, overclocking features and a nicer look. It's useful sometimes, just don't expect more FPS. So buy the motherboard for the CPU support and features you actually need, not the biggest chipset name. Now the same text appears everywhere else, a 1200 watt power supply does not make your mid-range PC faster. Just buy like a quality PC with the right cables and enough power. A giant IO does not add FPS when the current cooler already works. It can still make sense for a hot CPU, less noise, limited space, or simply because you like the look. Just do not call that look a performance upgrade. Also like PCI Express generation chasing, premium cases, extra RGB fans, and expensive thermal paste follow the same rule. If they fix heat, noise, fit, power, or a feature you need, they matter. If they fix nothing, they are hobby upgrades. So waste number 5 is letting support parts steal the budget from the CPU and GPU. Now what actually matters here is a solid mid-range motherboard, a quality PCU, enough cooling, and a case with decent airflow. Then stop. And to make a sense out of all of these things, here are the 5 better buys. A real GPU jump, not a small side grade, a PC with standard parts and a useful CPU upgrade path, not a locked pre-build, a matched 2-stick RAM kit, 16GB on a budget, 32 for a modern build, a reliable SSD with enough space, not like a Gen 5 label, and solid mid-range support parts, not flagship everything. That is how I ended with enough bad or unused parts to be like 6 extra PCs at this point. I kept buying the expensive version of the wrong solution. Now drop your CPU, GPU, RAM, main game and target FPS in the comments. I will pick the most broken setup and tell you what you should buy first. Also send this to the friend who is about to buy like a 5090 for Valorant, and if you want to see more videos about gaming tech without a marketing script, check out the next video.